Under the blinding lights of Congress, Jasmine Crockett drops the DNA bombshell, Ivanka Trump's secret exposed, and the Trump dynasty trembles. Could this be the scandal that finally tears it all apart? Stay with us. This is a story worth every second of your time. The hearing room was suffocating with silence, every seat jammed, every spotlight blazing as if the entire nation was trapped in this single chamber. The cameras burned red, streaming to millions who clutched their screens, knowing this day could rewrite history. Reporters didn't dare blink, their pens frozen midair, because one sentence could explode like a grenade. The atmosphere was heavy, not just political. This was Judgment Day. It felt less like Congress and more like a trial broadcast to the world. At the center sat Jasmine Crockett, a young lawmaker with eyes sharp as blades. She looked calm, but the tension around her was electric. Her presence declared war against the powerful, against the myths America had been sold. She wasn't just asking questions, she was preparing to rip apart the facade of a dynasty. In her silence, you could almost hear the promise, "I will not back down." Then Ivanka Trump entered. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect posture, yet her eyes betrayed her. For a split second, fear cracked through the mask. The unspoken question thundered in every heart. Was she truly Donald Trump's daughter, or the greatest lie in modern American politics under the blinding lights? Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her voice sharp enough to cut the silence. Let's go back to the early 1990s. She began, every syllable carrying weight. The years of your father's divorce from Ivana Trump. Where were you in those moments? What was the role of Donald Trump in your life then? The room stilled even further, every reporter frozen, as if the air had been sucked out. Ivanka Trump's face remained poised, her chin tilted up with quiet confidence. She answered with no hesitation, her tone steady and almost rehearsed. My father was always by my side. No matter what was happening, he never left me. The sentence floated in the chamber like a shield, but Jasmine's eyes locked onto her target, refusing to blink. The calm before the storm was over. Jasmine reached down into the stack of folders, before her pulling out an envelope so old the paper looked brittle-stained, slightly at the edges with the wear of time. She didn't speak at first, she let the envelope itself speak. Its faded cream surface bore a heavy red seal, pressed deep into the paper, with the insignia of a New Jersey medical institute. Across the front, the smudged handwriting of a doctor's signature sprawled with authority still visible, despite 3 decades of dust. She lifted it high for the cameras, making sure every lens captured the weight of history in her hand. The reporters in the room stirred at once, their whispers overlapping like sparks catching dry grass. For a moment, even the sound of shuffling papers from the other lawmakers ceased. It was as if every person in the chamber could hear their own pulse. This Jasmine announced, her voice booming under the echo of marble walls, is a DNA report dated 1992 from a certified medical company in New Jersey. She slid the contents onto the desk, holding up the pages with slow precision. The bold black letters, still sharp despite the yellowing edges, spelled out the unthinkable. The results did not match a biological connection between Donald J. Trump and Ivanka Marie Trump. The revelation detonated like dynamite in the silence. Ivanka's shoulders stiffened instantly, her body locked as though bracing against a physical blow. Her lips trembled faintly, betraying nerves she could no longer hide. Yet she forced her expression back into composure. She raised her chin again, trying to wear confidence like armor, and said with measured defiance, "This is false, completely false." But the crack in her voice was faint, and every microphone in the room caught it. Cameras zoomed closer, pushing into Ivanka's face. The angle of the shot caught the faint twitch at the corner of her mouth, the icy sheen of sweat forming just above her brow. Reporters scribbled furiously, their whispers now turning into urgent murmurs racing through the chamber. Impossible. No way. Is this real? The words hissed like snakes among the press gallery, traveling from row to row. Some gasped, some shook their heads, and others just stared wide-eyed, unable to process what they were seeing. The energy in the room shifted in an instant. It was no longer a formal hearing. It was a battlefield, and Jasmine had just fired the first shot. Across the table, several Republican lawmakers sprang up in protest. Their voices collided in a chorus of objection. Out of order, irrelevant to this hearing. Withdraw that document. Their tone was urgent, almost desperate, but Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't lean back, didn't fold under pressure. She held her ground with a steely calm, her voice cutting through the noise. You can shout, you can protest, but this is official evidence. 30 years ago, the truth was written. 30 years ago, it was hidden from the American people. She slammed the folder shut with finality, the sound echoing like a gavel strike. The Republicans quieted their fury, swallowed by the force of her conviction. For a split second, the entire chamber held its breath. Ivanka tried to recover, clutching at the remnants of her polished persona. This is nothing but a smear, a fabrication, she insisted, but the cracks in her mask widened. Her hands fidgeted under the table, her polished nails tapping against the wood. Her voice, once steady, wavered under the unbearable spotlight. Jasmine didn't press further, not yet. She let the silence punish her opponent, letting Ivanka's own unraveling fill the air. The cameras caught everything, the stiffness of her shoulders, the rigid set of her jaw, the way her eyes darted toward the exit, as if searching for escape. In a hearing room built to contain power, Ivanka suddenly looked small. Jasmine leaned closer, her voice dropping lower but striking harder. This truth has been buried for 3 decades. 30 years of silence, 30 years of deception, and now it stands in the open. Her words were not just for Ivanka, they were for the millions watching. Every syllable was designed to pierce through the cameras and into the living rooms across America. Outside the chamber, televisions blared with the live feed. In diners and offices and homes, people leaned closer. Their jaws clenched, their eyes wide. They were witnessing history unfold in real time. Ivanka froze again, her face pale under the lights. The cameras caught her lips parting slightly, as if she might say something, anything to defend herself, but no words came. The whispers in the room swelled louder, a storm threatening to break into chaos. Jasmine sat back in her chair, calm, composed, but her eyes burned with fire. The truth was written in 1992, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of final judgment. And America deserves to face it now. The hook cracked open like a warning shot. If 1992 was only the beginning, then what else has been buried for the last 3 decades? The chamber still vibrated from the 1992 revelation as Ivanka drew breath, and the air snapped tight like stretched wire. She lifted her chin and fired back, voice steady and sharpened by outrage that felt carefully rehearsed. This is a fabrication, she said, daring the microphones to doubt her, and the audience to blink first. The document could be forged. She angled toward the cameras as if appealing over the committee to the country itself, hunting for higher ground. Every face turned toward her seemed carved in stone, waiting to see if the mask would crack now. Jasmine did not flinch. She answered in a level tone that cut cleaner than any shout, the kind of calm that makes steel seem soft. Everything I present has been legally verified. No flourish, followed only process chain of custody logs, notarized transfers, archive retrieval receipts, date stamps, and barcodes, all reviewable by counsel. She read file numbers into the record like coordinates that could be walked in daylight without fear. She produced a thinner folder marked with a blue tab and pressed a recorder, letting a steady voice fill the room like a metronome. It was the former lab employee who handled the sample, sworn and time-stamped weeks before the hearing, identified by license and roll, and reachable for cross-examination. The audio carried the quick click of a pen, then the statement, "I processed the 1992 specimens, and the result did not support a paternal match." Jasmine noted the license number, the years of service, and the lab's accreditation code from New Jersey, precise and checkable. She displayed the sworn affidavit beside the transcript so the chain was visible end to end for every camera. Ivanka leaned forward and pivoted hard, trying to seize the narrative by speed and scope and sheer brightness. She spoke of initiatives, councils, and job fairs, of long days in the West Wing, and longer flights at dawn that blurred weeks. She highlighted programs for small businesses and workforce development, the meetings, the memos, the signatures that marked service. "I serve my country," she said, voice clear, "and I stand by my work." The pivot was polished, practiced, and aimed at drowning out the word DNA before it could echo. Jasmine stepped through it like a blade through fabric. "We are not talking about politics, but about bloodline." She returned to the report's authenticity, the unbroken chain, the authentication of the doctor's signature with seals and dates. Was there any contrary test? Any certified expert prepared to challenge the methodology on the record today, under oath with credentials? A heavy quiet spread, the kind that makes even supporters hold their breath and opponents forget their lines. The chair's gavel rested but ready, and the cameras drank the stillness like proof delivered in silence on replay. Ivanka's hands trembled, then stilled around a glass of water. She did not lift, the ring of condensation widening. "I request a brief recess," she said at last, eyes flicking to the dais, as if a door might open. "Request denied. The witness will answer the question," the chair replied, dry as parchment and just as final. The report was dated. The lab certified the identifiers matched the signature, authenticated, the audio corroborated beyond quibble. She asked if Ivanka wished to submit any document that contradicted the report on the record today. She asked if Ivanka wanted any expert placed on the record to dispute the lab's process, protocols, or accreditation. She asked whether Ivanka disputed that the envelope and its contents had lawfully traveled from archive to desk without break. "This is politically motivated," Ivanka said, but even her allies heard the thinness of the claim as it faded. The room seemed to lean toward the witness table, waiting for an answer that never truly came, a collective held breath. The cameras showed the envelope, the transcript, the stillness of a face running out of alibis in real time. Jasmine's palm rested on the folder, as if sealing a statement with quiet force, certain and unyielding. No one moved. Even the air felt pinned to the record, suspended and listening. If Ivanka cannot prove it, what evidence will Jasmine reveal next? The answer arrived in the form of a new document. Jasmine raised a fresh folder, its tab black and clean, and opened it toward the camera so every line was visible. "This," she said, "is an order issued by the FBI in July 2016. The air tightened. Her fingertip traced the heading order to seal and restrict dissemination before she read the operative clause aloud. It was plain, not poetic. The order barred disclosure or reuse of DNA test results related to Ivanka Trump for the duration of the presidential campaign. She laid the first page flat and held the second to the lights until the watermark glowed through. A hard signature ran across the bottom in confident strokes, the name of a senior FBI official printed beneath in block letters. Beside it, the raised seal puckered the page like pressed wax. Date, file number, routing codes, each detail neat, clinical, and hard to dismiss. The microphones drank the hush. Every eye waited for impact now. Jasmine read the key language into the record, steady and precise, then let the last word hang before it dropped. "This order prohibits the disclosure or reuse of the DNA report," she said, "for the entirety of the 2016 presidential campaign." She let the timeline play in every mind. July 2016, the heat of a race, in a file quietly sealed. Who asked for it? Who benefited? Why did a medical report about parentage become a campaign secret? What public interest was served by silence when the nation was selecting its leader? She shifted from recitation to analysis, her voice low but sharp. The chronology was the story: a decades-old test, a national election, and a blackout order at the very peak of the contest. She reminded the room that such orders are not routine for family matters. Something had to justify that level of federal shield. If the public's right to know was overridden, whose interest outweighed it? The question was not technical, it was moral and political. The silence throbbed like a warning siren no one dared to silence. If this was standard procedure, produce the memo. If it was extraordinary, explain the urgency. Ivanka tried to meet the moment and found no footing. "I don't know," she said, the words arriving too fast, landing too flat, as if they startled even her. Her eyes slid to the dais, then back to the page that now seemed to glare up at her. She adjusted a cufflink with fingers that would not stay still. "I don't know," she repeated softer, as if lowering the volume could soften the truth. The phrase echoed off marble and camera glass until it sounded like a verdict. Jasmine leaned in, not to shout but to slice. Not knowing or deliberate silence. The line was simple and it cut clean. She asked whether Ivanka could name any policy rationale, any legal basis, any imminent harm that demanded this blackout. She asked who requested the order, who drafted it, who approved it. She asked whether Ivanka or her counsel ever moved to lift the seal once the election ended. The chair did not move, the gavel stayed still, and the air felt dense enough to hold shape. Reporters gripped their pens like climbers clutching a ledge. No one coughed, no one whispered, no one breathed. The comparison rose on its own and would not leave a new Watergate, not in tapes, but in paper cut to fit the dark. The tension crept up the walls and coiled around the lights until the bulbs seemed to buzz. You could feel staffers swallow hard, as if the room itself had history pressing on its chest. Jasmine set the document down as if returning a relic to bedrock. This order exists, she said, and it existed when the country was choosing a president. No one argued. There was nothing left to argue. Ivanka's jaw set, then loosened, then set again, the rhythm of a defense without a plan. For a breath, the hearing room existed outside time, a still image that said more than any speech. The hook snapped tight across the chamber like a tripwire. If the FBI intervened, who stands behind the cover-up? When Barron sank into his chair, the hush fractured into voices that collided like steel in a narrow hallway. One lawmaker snapped on a microphone. "We need to continue this investigation immediately." Another fired back. "This hearing has already crossed every ethical line." Hands shot up, points of order flew, and the dais divided into two clean lines, those demanding subpoenas and those demanding shields. The gavel hammered without mercy, but the arguments only grew louder, a storm trapped in a marble box. For a long breath, the chamber looked less like a committee and more like a fault line giving way. On the pro-inquiry side, a senior member leaned forward, glasses low on his nose. "We have 4 corroborating pillars," he counted, tapping the table photo guest list, flight logs, and hospital records. He requested immediate preservation orders, subpoenas for travel agencies, and testimony from custodians of records. "The public interest is compelling," he said. No one is above verification. Heads around him nodded, pens clicking in grim agreement. Across the dais, defenders rallied like a wall. "This is a smear built on innuendo," a congresswoman declared, urging an immediate recess. She moved to strike the recording from the evidentiary binder and warned against trial by headline. Another member called for a censure of reckless leaks, accusing the committee of weaponizing process. "Respect the family," he added, voice hard with performance. Between the two camps, the microphones hissed like fuse wire. Procedure turned into combat. Motions stacked on motions. Amendments spawned in real time. Clerks sprinted copies down the row, while counsel whispered language sharp enough to draw blood. A vote was called, then challenged, then called again on a narrowed question: compel documents or postpone. The gavel banged echo, ricocheting off stone. No sound actually settled. Everything felt suspended, as though gravity itself wanted to see the outcome before landing. Beyond the chamber, the world swallowed the story whole. International networks cut to live chirons, mutating by the minute, power and parentage. The Palm Beach birth dynasty on trial. Correspondents stood in rain and neon in London, Warsaw, São Paulo, and Seoul, explaining the stakes to startled commuters. Push alerts flooded phones. Commentators argued over law versus legend. Late-night producers rewrote their monologues on the fly. Clips from the hearing looped on overhead screens in airports, bars, and subway cars. In the noise of a planet, a single sentence kept surfacing. "Who do you represent?" Inside the room, Jasmine said nothing. She closed the folder with the steady care of someone placing a weight back where it belongs. Her chair did not creak. Her breath did not rush. She did not follow the fight with her eyes. The cameras found her stillness and stayed there as if the quiet itself were a statement. She let the exhibits breathe, let the stamps and seals speak, let the pages argue without her voice writing them. When the gavel finally rested, her silence remained the only thing in the room that did not need a vote. Newsrooms abroad lit maps tracing lines from Palm Beach to New York to capitals that heard their echoes. Editorial boards argued whether bloodlines should matter in a republic. Tabloids splashed photos with arrows and circles. A veteran anchor in Paris intoned, "This is not gossip. This is governance," while a panel in Tokyo parsed the forensic terms with fascination. In Warsaw, the bulletin lingered on the nurse's affidavit, treating it like a state document. Wire services pushed updates few minutes apart, replacing alleged with authenticated as each stamp rolled in. Airports changed gates. Screens did not. Every feed showed the same still frame of a son, a name, and a question. Back inside, alliances calcified. A centrist member cleared his throat and tried to broker calm. "Let us stipulate to the records and schedule an evidentiary hearing." He was drowned out by simultaneous shouts of "vote now" and "point of order." Someone called for counsel to read the chain of custody aloud. Someone else asked to enter a family statement into the record. The chair repeated one at a time until the words lost shape and became percussion. Through it, Jasmine stayed motionless, a point the storm could not move. From the blank line on the birth certificate to the next page of history, the room held its breath. Jasmine slid a gray court-stamped folder from the stack and squared it to the microphone. She opened it slowly, letting the weight of paper announce itself before any word did. "This is a confidential report from the New York Family Court dated 1992, she said. The edges were cream and stiff, the docket number marching across the top like coordinates through time. She turned the first page toward the lights so the watermark rose like a ghost under glass. The clerk's stamp sat hard in the corner, the judge's initials ran crisp across the margin, and the word "filed" punched the date into stone. Jasmine read the finding exactly as written, her voice flat and final. "The DNA test results between Donald J. Trump and Ivanka Marie do not confirm a father-child relationship." The sentence was clinical, but it landed like a blow the whole chamber felt. She let the page rest in a clear sleeve so every lens could lock on the seal. Then she traced the trail that brought it here, brick by brick and name by name. The report had been sealed by court order for decades under strict legal protections. It was unsealed only after a petition by a group of independent attorneys whose signatures, bar numbers, and service addresses were now in the record. She slid forward the unsealing order, embossed crest-raised date and signature visible like coordinates stamped. Ivanka swayed not enough to fall, but enough for the cameras to catch a tremor. Her hands tightened on the table edge while her posture fought gravity for the appearance of control. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, then forced them open with stubborn discipline. Under the hot lights, her face drained to porcelain, and a wet shine gathered along her lower lashes. She tugged her cuff once, a useless correction, and tried to breathe evenly. Jasmine did not gloat. She anchored the moment to the facts. She repeated the docket number, the division, the filing date, and the release date, building a ladder the country could climb. Then she set the words that mattered in the center of the room. "America deserves to know the truth." She spoke it softly, but the microphones carried it like thunder down the marble. The cameras obeyed the gravity of the sentence and moved closer. Lenses found the twitch at the corner of Ivanka's mouth, the whiteness in her cheeks, the glassy eyes that would not blink. A boom mic caught the smallest swallow and a breath that broke in the middle. Photographers fired in staccato bursts and then stopped as if something sacred had entered the frame. Across the dais, one senator stared at the blotter, while another rubbed his temple like a man with history pressing down. Outside the hearing, the country erupted as if a siren had been wired into every screen. News desks cut banners, anchors broke programming, and push alerts stacked on phones like falling dominoes. Social feeds turned to flood hashtags, surge threads multiplied, and live rooms ballooned with faces tilted toward the Capitol. In diners, forks paused midair. In cabs, drivers raised the volume and shook their heads. The city's air felt charged, as if the grid itself were carrying the story. Inside, Jasmine kept palms on the table, steadying the record instead of pressing it down. She restated the finding once for clarity and once for permanence, never changing a syllable. The DNA test results between Donald J. Trump and Ivanka Marie do not confirm a father-child relationship. The second reading sounded heavier, as if gravity had doubled inside the chamber. Ivanka sat motionless, shoulders set, eyes wet, a figure, carved by light and by the moment itself. The chair glanced at the clock, but no one else broke the silence. Reporters remembered their pens and then forgot them again, hands hovering above empty lines. Even the lights seemed to hum lower the room, tuning itself to the document under glass. History did not shout, it tightened. And in that tightening, the truth finally stood where everyone could see it. With the court's words still hanging in the air, the room slid into a final breathless stillness. Ivanka tried to hold the image that had carried her for years, calm, elegant, untouchable, but the mask no longer fit. Her smile kept breaking at the edges, her posture sagged a fraction, and the camera lights made the strain look louder than any shout. She adjusted a cuff, then a strand of hair, then the glass that she never lifted, each movement smaller than the last. The dignity she reached for turned brittle in her hands. Desperation arrived quietly and then refused to leave. Jasmine did not gloat. She refused the easy victory lap. Her voice was steady, almost gentle, like a light turned on in a dark room. I am not exposing this to smear anyone. I am exposing this so the truth can be seen. The words traveled the length of the chamber and returned with weight, not heat. She kept her eyes on the record, not the headlines, and let the facts sit where everyone could see them. Her restraint made the floor feel solid underfoot again, even as the moment shook the walls. The chair cleared his throat and the microphones caught the scrape of history moving forward. The committee will entertain a motion to impanel an independent investigative committee, he said, each syllable clipped and careful. A member moved, another seconded, and hands rose, some eager, some reluctant, all recorded. The gavel fell once clean and final, so ordered. The decision did not shout. It clicked into place like a lock turning. A new folder would be opened, but this chapter had already carved its mark. Ivanka did not move. Her shoulders were squared by habit, but the power behind that pose had drained away. The cameras found her face and stayed there unblinking, as if the lens itself had questions it needed answered. Her skin went pale under the lights and the gloss in her eyes turned from shine to shimmer, then to tears that refused to fall. The room saw a public figure sitting very still, while the idea of her shifted in the minds of millions. She looked like someone listening for a sound she hoped would never come. Reporters surged only when the hearing adjourned, and the hallway folded into a tunnel of microphones. Jasmine stepped through it, shoulders level pace, even as questions cracked against her like rain against glass. She did not offer a speech or a victory line or a headline made for the crawl. She stopped once, met the nearest camera, and said, "The truth has begun to speak." Then she moved again, leaving the sentence to walk on its own. The phrase felt simple in the air and enormous on every screen. The final image belonged to both women at once. Inside, Ivanka sat in the frame of a witness table, perfectly still and suddenly small, while the seal of the United States loomed behind her like a verdict without sound. Outside, Jasmine stood upright in the surge and kept her balance, a figure cut from steadiness rather than spectacle. One side collapsed inward, trying to hold shape. The other side stood firm, anchored to the record. This was the last crest of the wave, the emotional peak that decides what remains after the water falls away. In the public mind, the chapter closed on its own, one future dimming, one future defined. The hallway noise from the hearing had barely faded when the split began to harden. Across the country, fault lines lit up like a grid under stress, and people chose sides with the speed of a reflex. Conservative voices rallied to Ivanka, calling her a victim of weaponized process and a target of political theater. They said the record was twisted, the motive dirty, the timing designed to wound. On the other side, critics framed the revelation as a reckoning long delayed. They called it the death blow to a dynasty built on image and denial. Talk radio ignited first, a rolling thunder of callers stacked on hold, everyone certain, no one unsure. Hosts framed it as a witch hunt and a smear, daring anyone to explain how a family could be tried by paperwork. Podcasts dropped emergency episodes with titles that screamed urgency, promising inside context and secret angles. Cable banners pulsed red and white and blue, and primetime panels lined up like jury boxes. Sound bites replaced paragraphs, and certainty replaced patience. Across 100 feeds, the same question wore 100 faces. Newsrooms moved like firehouses, hearing the alarm. CNN pushed a breaking banner and cut to live analysis, framing timelines on the wall, encircling dates in digital ink. The New York Times fired off a push alert and rolled out a long read before midnight, fronted by a headline that made even quiet rooms go quiet. Fox News put up a double box graphic, a nightly host on one side and a montage of courthouse seals on the other, hammering doubt into the timeline. Regional stations spliced in man-on-the-street clips and church steps interviews, turning national noise into local pulse. Overnight schedules bent. Anchors stayed in their chairs long past the credits. The Trump family said nothing, and the silence worked like an amplifier. Official accounts posted nothing new, a stillness that felt louder than the news itself. Aides offered no comment, and spokespeople went off-grid, their phones drifting to voicemail and unanswered texts. Outside, Trump Tower cameras stacked on tripods like a picket line of quiet machines' lenses pointed at doors that never opened. Helicopters hung over Midtown and drifted to Palm Beach, chasing movement that never came. The void filled with questions, and questions filled with theories. On Capitol Hill, the shock rewrote the day's script in real time. Republican lawmakers stepped around reporters in tight hallways, eyes on phones, voices locked on repeats of, "I have not reviewed the documents." Doors that were usually ajar swung shut and brief smiles turned into careful lines. Democrats moved in clusters and held press scrums on marble steps, demanding transparency and vowing oversight. Some moderates tried to thread a needle so thin it barely had a hole calling for process while refusing the word crisis. Security details grew thicker at committee rooms, and whispers rode the air like dust. In diners, coffee went cold as tables turned into panels without cameras. A retired teacher in Ohio tapped the headline with a spoon and said, "If the paper says it, then it's ink." A contractor in Arizona shook his head and said, "Paper can lie, people can lie, cameras never lie." On church steps, the talk stretched long after the benediction, a circle of parishioners weighing truth and mercy in equal parts. In barbershops and union halls, people raised their voices not out of anger, but because everyone else had. Families paused mid-meal to stare at a crawl that would not stop crawling. Online, the streets never closed. Hashtags rose and fell like waves in a storm, and threads braided evidence and anger and rumor into a rope that pulled all night. Clips from the hearing racked up millions of views by dawn, edited into punchy reels that hit like drumbeats. Memes went to work, brutal and fast, turning solemn frames into weapons and jokes into knives. Influencers split the screen with Zoom debates and donation links, and lines of text urged followers to stay loud and stay watchful. Fact-checkers chased the current in real time, posting receipts with timestamps and context that fought for breath. Editorial pages took their corners and drew lines with ink that would not wash off. One paper argued that the country had a right to the story start to finish without a blackout where the truth should be. Another warned that families should not be collateral in politics and that process should not become spectacle. Cable panels argued about intent and standard and precedent until words like norms and guardrails sounded like props. The word Watergate re-entered the air, not as a history lesson, but as a measuring stick. Nothing got smaller by morning. Everything felt larger than the day before. The silence from the family turned into a second story all its own. A cousin reposted an old photo with no caption, and the internet treated it like a coded missive from a war room. An ally gave a two-word statement, "no comment," and those two words spun for hours under hot lights. A lawyer surfaced on a friendly show and said, "We will respond in court," and that one line became a headline like a drum. Outside homes in New York and Florida, the sidewalk press watched for shadows behind curtains and called it movement. The quiet tightened into a knot no one could untie. On the Hill, committees compared calendars and counted votes with the care of surgeons. Staffers passed binders and kept their voices down, and motion drafts multiplied like photocopies. One caucus talked subpoenas, another talked privilege, a third talked midterm optics as if optics were oxygen. A single phrase, independent investigative committee, echoed through offices like a fire drill command. The building knows the difference between a bad week and a turning point, and this felt like the second one. Elevators stopped short, and conversations ended before doors opened. At street level, the country carried on while caring more than usual. Morning joggers argued with earbuds and debating due process between mile markers. Teachers unlocked classrooms and found students already fluent in last night's talking points. Line cooks slapped down orders while the kitchen TV spit heat of its own, and every fry hissed like a comment in a thread. A mechanic wiped grease off a phone to scroll a clip, then wiped the screen again, as if clarity could be polished in. The ordinary day bent but did not break. It just learned to hold more weight. By nightfall, the map looked the same, but the ground felt different underfoot. People who had never agreed on anything found themselves sharing the same stunned silence. People who had agreed on everything found themselves divided by a single line of text on a single page. The story did not end. It settled into the bones of the week, heavy and present. America remained one country with two stories, both told at full volume. And for the first time in a long time, even the loudest voices paused to listen for what might come next. What followed was not calm, it was excavation. Investigators fanned out like a controlled flood, pulling asset ledgers, school admissions, and immigration files into the same hard light that had burned through the hearing. Subpoenas hit banks, registrars, and courthouses. FOIA requests stacked on agency desks in tall, nervous piles. Teams mapped timelines onto whiteboards, addresses, account opening, signatures, and stamps stitched together like a stitching pattern across decades. A forensic accountant circled a cluster of entries from the early 90s and wrote one word on the glass: why. In the hum of copy machines and the clatter of binders, the country heard the sound of a life being audited in real time. The money trail came first because money always leaves footprints even when people don't. Trust instruments and quiet LLCs formed a lattice around familiar surnames and unfamiliar signatories, a structure that looked sturdy until someone tapped the joints. Valuations logged 1 month swayed the next. A penthouse carried 2 numbers that didn't agree with each other, or the tax records that followed. A notary's crest appeared in Florida on the same day the signer was photographed in Manhattan, and a courier receipt offered a third location entirely. Bank compliance officers flagged the anomalies in small, polite notes that felt like smoke alarms chirping in an empty house. No single entry shouted fraud, but together they hummed the wrong tune. Admissions offices, usually the quietest rooms in any city, became the next battleground. Archivists rolled out metal drawers of microfilm, and registrars held forms with the reverence of surgeons handling bone. The early school years yielded neat signatures and one-line addresses, yet some guardianship lines carried only a mother's hand, while the father's line lay silent. Immunization records were present and tidy, but the emergency contact forms from one grade to the next shifted without explanation. A school nurse's ledger had a phone number that never matched the family's public listings, and a note that a representative handled all paperwork. Each scrap was harmless alone. The pattern built its own tension. Immigration files, quiet, technical, unforgiving, drew special eyes. Legacy microfiche from the old INS cabinets gave up crisp I-94 cards, with dates that aligned mostly until one arrival stamp overlapped a documented trip in the opposite direction. Passenger manifests listed a mother and child pairing with a last name that didn't match the media biographies printed years later. A consular notation used an internal code that experts said was rare for routine travel and more common in sensitive cases. The record did not accuse. It asked over and over, which version is the official one? With every page added to the pile, the air felt a degree heavier. Inside the Republican Party, the shock rippled like a dropped pane of glass. Donors called consultants at strange hours, their questions short and their patience shorter. Is this survivable? Strategists drafted 2 memos, one for defense, one for distance, and waited to see which would be blessed by the next polling cycle. On the Hill, leadership encouraged focus, a word that meant, please talk about anything else. And members nodded as if nods could smother microphones. The base demanded unity on talk radio, while county chairs quietly asked for guidance none of them had. In the war rooms, the whiteboards filled with pathways that narrowed with every headline. The crisis of confidence became a posture you could spot in a hallway. Some lawmakers wrapped themselves in loyalty and marched toward cameras with phrases polished to the point of blur. Others discovered the art of being nowhere at once, slipping out back doors and ducking into elevators as questions chased their heels. And private staffers confessed they could not square the document on screen with the narrative in their inbox. A veteran operative tapped a stack of newsprint and said, "It's not the blast that kills you, it's the pressure wave." The party had weathered storms before, but this one cut through the roof and into the foundation. Trump tried to reclaim the weather under stadium lights, and the crowd arrived to help. Flags rippled, music pounded, and the chant found its rhythm. "We love Ivanka." He walked out with the old stride, and the old showman's hand waved a silhouette built for this exact moment. "She is strong," he said, and the applause surged, grateful for a line everyone knew by heart. But when he added, "She has been treated very unfairly," the teleprompter lagged and his voice chopped a beat short, the kind of stumble a veteran never makes. The wobble wasn't loud, but it was new, and the cameras made it louder. He pushed through, doubling down on family loyalty and persecution by enemies who fear success. "They cannot break us," he said, and the crowd roared because crowds know their role. Yet a handful of faces near the front held still in the screaming light, trying to read the man and the moment at once. An aide leaned toward the stage manager and whispered, and the playlist rose to drown the paragraph that might have gone wrong. When the rally ended, the applause felt like a lid closing rather than a door opening. Even the exits hummed with a doubt no one wanted to name. Opponents did not waste the stumble. Ads cut together the hearing room, the blank line on the certificate, and a single slow shot of the sealed order's watermark pulsing under light. A voiceover asked, if they hid this, what else is off limits? Debates turned sharper, and the word trust landed like a hammer at the end of practice sentences. Down-ballot candidates borrowed the theme and stapled it to every issue, turning transparency into a litmus test. Field organizers printed clipboards that read "Sunlight Now," and the slogan looked cleaner than it felt. Think tanks, law schools, and civil liberties groups split into task forces and produced papers that tried to slow the heat with rigor. One panel mapped the boundary between a public official's obligations and a family member's right to privacy, drawing lines that bent when the family member holds power or official influence. Another argued that minors deserve absolute insulation, while adults must accept a narrower shield when they act in public capacities. A third proposed a bright-line rule: when a personal fact becomes instrumental to public trust disclosure, should be mandatory under strict humane protocols. The goal was not voyeurism, they wrote. The goal was consent and clarity. The country read half to learn and half to confirm what it already believed. Lawyers filled studios and lecture halls with statutes and case notes like carpenters spreading tools on a bench. They explained sworn declarations attached to financial, ethical, and security filings, and the penalties that trail false statements across jurisdictions. They walked through how family status can alter eligibility for certain waivers, allowances, or access in ways the public rarely sees. When asked to summarize the stakes, a former prosecutor gave the line that locked into every Chiron: if parentage was concealed, this could be considered fraud in declarations. The sentence did not shout. It clicked. It sounded like a door closing on a room no one had realized they were in. The discussion spilled into classrooms and boardrooms, church basements and campus greens, because the line between privacy and accountability touches every life. Parents asked whether the sins of adults should pull children now grown into the light, and children asked whether their parents' choices can ever be entirely private when power is public. Professors warned that bad laws written in a panic last longer than the panic itself. Pastors preached mercy while insisting that mercy is not the enemy of truth. In union halls, people wanted to know who decides what must be disclosed and who guards the guardrails. Meanwhile, the expanded inquiry ground forward with the patience of a glacier and the pressure of a freight train. A federal judge signed off on limited subpoenas for archived records, narrowly tailored and tightly supervised, the kind of legal needlework that takes time to stitch. Chain of custody logs were treated like living things. Every hand that touched a page wrote its name in ink that could be read on television. When a discrepancy surfaced, it did not explode. It pinged a dashboard, summoned a sworn statement, and was weighed against the rest. The country learned a new skill in prime time: the difference between a data point and a pattern. Polling bounced like a heartbeat on strong coffee. One day showed resilience, the next showed erosion, the third showed something worse: confusion. Focus groups turned into confessionals where people admitted that the facts had outpaced their sense of the world. A retired nurse in Michigan said, "I don't want to know this, but now that I do, I can't unknow it." A warehouse supervisor in Pennsylvania said, "It's not about her, it's about the rules, and I don't know what the rules are anymore." Uncertainty spread faster than outrage, because outrage is heavy and uncertainty floats. Editorial boards tried to pin the moment to a page and found it kept moving. One paper argued that transparency must be codified, not begged for, even when it hurts. Another insisted that family is not a legal tactic, and that the law must treat power consistently no matter how it dresses. A third said the quiet part loud. We built a politics of celebrity, and now we are surprised that the camera will not blink. Nobody loved the mirror. The story was holding up, which is how you know it was a mirror. The map of opinions looked like a weather radar covered in storm cells, none of them moving the same direction. At midnight, cable shows switched from panels to town halls and took calls from people who never call. A grandmother in Georgia asked whether the law can protect dignity and still defend the public trust. A college sophomore in Oregon wanted to know who counts as a public figure when no one is truly private online. A lawyer in Texas said the remedy is process, slow fare blind, and boring, and the audience laughed because nothing on television is supposed to be boring. Yet boredom began to sound like safety, like a place where the ground doesn't shift under your feet while you sleep. The cameras stayed because they always do. By week's end, America had not settled on a single story so much as accepted that this one had chapters no one could skip. The investigation widened, the party strained, the rallies roared, and the ads multiplied. The law stepped forward not with a cavalry charge, but with a clerk's stamp and a judge's pen. People fought in comment threads and forgave each other over breakfast, sometimes in that order. The nation did not break. It argued, and the argument filled the air like weather, ever present, ever shifting, and impossible to ignore. The chamber's shock had not yet cooled when Congress moved with a rare kind of unity. A bipartisan investigative committee was announced armed with subpoena power that reached into the guarded vaults of the Trump Organization. It wasn't just another oversight panel. It was a political earthquake. The order read into the record in clipped tones gave investigators authority to demand every relevant file, financial records, medical correspondence, personal contracts, and internal memoranda. The decision was not whispered or hedged. It came with a gavel strike that echoed like a starting gun. Washington had heard thunder before, but this was the first lightning bolt aimed directly at the Trump dynasty's foundation. From the moment the announcement hit, the newswire subpoenas flew like arrows. Bankers, accountants, and clerks found themselves holding orders stamped with the seal of Congress, orders they could not ignore. Moving trucks rolled up to storage facilities in Queens, Manhattan, and Florida, hauling boxes stamped with confidential and archive. Couriers in dark suits carried armfuls of binders into secure evidence rooms, their footsteps sharp on marble floors. Photographers pressed against barricades, shouting questions as crates of documents disappeared behind guarded doors. Each box looked ordinary, but inside were decades of decisions, signatures, and secrets that could redraw the outline of American politics. Among the first troves to surface were depositions from secondary witnesses, people who had lived in the shadows of the family empire. A physician, now gray-haired, stepped forward under subpoena. He remembered handling a DNA test in the early 1990s, a sample that had arrived under instructions more secretive than any he'd seen. His statement was simple but devastating. The test did not support paternity. A former Trump Organization staffer, once a mid-level manager, described being ordered to move sealed envelopes and lock boxes at night. "I didn't know what they contained," he said, "but I knew they weren't supposed to be seen." A lawyer sweating under the lights of deposition admitted he had drafted confidentiality agreements so airtight they felt more like prison walls than contracts. These weren't dramatic speeches, they were quiet confessions, but together they built a structure of silence enforced by fear and power. The investigation widened. Forensic accountants traced shell companies across borders, finding money trails that branched like rivers into offshore havens. Real estate filings carried notary stamps from offices that didn't exist anymore, raising questions no one had answers for. School records were compared line by line, revealing guardianship documents that shifted hands like cards in a game. Visa applications were pulled from microfilm archives, and one consular code, rare, unusual, and long forgotten, sparked debate among experts about special treatment. The committee's staff built timelines on wall-length charts, red string connecting events that no longer looked coincidental. Day by day, the puzzle pieces locked into place, painting a picture of concealment rather than accident. For the Republican Party, the weight of the investigation became unbearable. Donors whispered about pulling funding. Strategists scrambled to craft 2 speeches for every event, one in case the storm passed, one in case it didn't. Lawmakers ducked cameras in Capitol hallways, repeating the same hollow line, "I have not reviewed the documents." Behind closed doors, aides spoke frankly about a crisis of faith. "We can spin almost anything," one operative admitted, "but you can't spin DNA." The sense of invincibility that had shielded the party for years was gone, replaced by a gnawing doubt that spread faster than talking points. Donald Trump himself tried to stem the tide the only way he knew how to rally. The stadium roared with chants of "We love Ivanka." Flags waved and music thundered through the rafters. He walked on stage with the old swagger hand lifted in the familiar salute, but something in his gait betrayed the strain. "She is strong," he declared, and the applause thundered back. But when he added, "She has been treated very unfairly," his voice cracked, skipping a beat, a stumble so slight most crowds would forgive it, but not this one. The cameras caught it, magnified it, and replayed it across every network. For the first time, the showman's rhythm failed him. The opposition pounced. Political ads stitched together courtroom footage, the image of the blank signature line on Ivanka's birth certificate, and the haunting phrase from Jasmine Crockett, "America deserves to know the truth." The narration asked, if they hid this, what else have they hidden? In debates, rivals wielded the scandal like a blade slicing into Trump's credibility with surgical precision. Town halls echoed with questions from ordinary voters. If this is true, how can we trust anything else they've told us? The scandal didn't just damage Ivanka, it bled into every campaign speech, every handshake, every ballot. Legal experts filled the airwaves, their analysis cold and relentless. If parentage was concealed, one former prosecutor said this could be considered fraud in sworn declarations. A constitutional scholar added, when family becomes part of governance, personal facts are no longer private, they become questions of public trust. Law schools convened panels debating where privacy ends and accountability begins. Commentators drew parallels to Watergate, Iran, Contra, and other scandals that had bent but not broken the republic. Each expert's voice added weight, turning the conversation from gossip into doctrine. What had begun as whispers of family drama now stood framed as a test of law itself. Outside the Capitol, Ivanka's absence grew louder than any speech. Once a staple of magazine covers, press releases, and photo ops, she vanished into guarded homes and curtained cars. No statements, no interviews, no social media posts. Her silence was deafening, and the void it left invited speculation from every corner. Tabloids ran grainy photos of her behind tinted windows, while talk shows debated whether she would ever reappear. The woman once marketed as the polished face of the dynasty now existed only as a question mark, her image destroyed by the weight of unanswered truths. Into that silence stepped Jasmine Crockett. What began as one lawmaker's confrontation became the seed of a movement. Crowds gathered outside courthouses chanting her name, holding signs that read, "Truth first," and she asked. Editorials praised her courage, calling her the voice that dared. Late-night comedians replayed her lines, not as jokes, but as rallying cries, framing her as the rare politician who put truth above theater. She did not bask in the spotlight. She carried it like a burden, and that restraint, that refusal to gloat, made her rise even faster. In a matter of weeks, Jasmine Crockett went from representative to symbol, a figure of defiance in a landscape starved for honesty. The climax of her journey came not with another document or revelation, but with an image that would linger in history books. She stepped out of the Capitol as cameras surged, reporters shouting a wall of questions. She didn't stop for long. She gave only one sentence, the same one she had carried from the beginning. "The truth has begun to speak." Then she walked past the microphones, her face calm, her stride unbroken. The camera followed her until the frame tilted upward, catching the flag above the dome. Snapping in the wind, a symbol older and stronger than any scandal. That image replayed across every screen, Jasmine's silhouette against the Capitol steps, the flag alive above her. Narrators spoke in low, deliberate tones, their words hanging heavy over the footage. If the truth about bloodlines could be hidden for decades, the voice asked, then how many more secrets still sleep inside American politics? The question wasn't rhetorical, it was a challenge, a dare to look deeper. The scene froze there, flag and figure, locked in contrast, a story unfinished but undeniable. The nation watched, stunned, divided, and unsettled. Some saw justice served, others saw persecution disguised as oversight. But no one could look away. What had begun as whispers about a birth certificate ended as a referendum on truth itself. And as the credits of the day rolled across headlines, one fact remained. A country built on stories had just learned that even its most carefully crafted tales can collapse under the weight of reality. And if the truth has begun to speak, this is the moment. Now you decide whether it echoes or dies in silence. Stay with me for one more breath, because what happens next depends on you. If you believe facts should outrun spin, hit the subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update when new records surface and old myths crack. A single click costs nothing, but it tells every platform that the truth still has an audience. Do that before the next distraction smothers this story. Share this video with 3 people who argue silence is safer than sunlight. Send it to a friend who says both sides, to a coworker who thinks politics is a sport, and to that relative who texts headlines. Post it in your group chat, in your alumni forum, and in one place you know the conversation gets loud. When you share, you turn a break in the dam into a flood. Let the facts travel faster than the spin coming by morning. Drop a comment so we can build a public record no one can edit behind closed doors. Tell us where you were when you saw the document, how you felt when the seal glowed, and what question still burns in your chest. Type truth first if you want the committee to keep digging until the last page is on record. If you disagree, say why and back it with sources, because a strong record survives scrutiny. Your words are the oxygen that keeps this story alive. Now pause the noise for a second and take a screenshot of the date signatures and docket numbers. Save them to your phone, pin them in notes, and back them up to the cloud. When someone claims this never happened, you will have receipts that speak without shouting. Facts fade when they live only in feeds. They harden when people carry them. This is how you become a witness who cannot be erased. Here is the part that matters most if you want change to outlast outrage. Call your representative and say, do not weaken this inquiry and do not hide the documents. Email the Oversight Committee with the subject line, release the records, and ask for timelines to be public. Show up at a town hall and ask on camera, will you support full transparency with no exceptions? Be respectful, be specific, and be impossible to ignore. Support the people who do the work that breaks glass quietly. Subscribe to a paper, donate to a newsroom that files FOIA requests, or tip the reporter who stayed up to verify the watermark on screen. Follow the legal researchers who translate court orders into plain language you can share. When journalism has fuel, truth grows teeth. When it starves, rumors eat everything. Stay vigilant against the trick everyone knows and still falls for the shiny object dropped to bury the story that matters. Over the next 48 hours, you will see a feud, a rumor, and a headline shaped like bait. Do not chase it. If a claim looks perfect, demand the source. If the source is fog, let it go. Keep your eyes on the record that lives on paper, not the noise that dies in a scroll. If you are new here, start the playlist labeled Documented. Watch the hearing clips, comparisons, and timestamped breakdowns. Every claim in this series is tied to a line you can point at and read aloud. That is the standard we owe each other, and it is the way to win arguments without losing our minds. Learn the facts until you can repeat them without a script. Now, I am asking you to become a signal, not just an audience. Use the chapter markers to clip the moment the court report appears and post it with the line, "The truth has begun to speak." Pin that clip to your profile. Tag creators who value evidence over heat and invite them to duet stitch or respond. The more voices carry the facts, the less room for the echo of a lie. Here is the pledge for everyone who has watched this far. I will check sources before I share. I will correct myself when I am wrong. I will question claims without attacking people. I will push for transparency without making idols. I will outwork the algorithm with patience and proof. Copy that into the comments if it matches your standard. If it does not write your own code, then live by it in public. Remember that small choices scale when thousands move at once. 10 seconds to subscribe, 30 to share, 60 to call your representative, 90 to send an email, and 2 minutes to add your comment. None of that wins alone, but together it builds a wall the storm cannot knock down. You do not need 1 million followers to matter. You need persistence that does not blink. Every change starts as a calendar reminder someone refused to snooze. If you feel overwhelmed, take this one action before you close the tab. Write down the question that will not leave your mind and set a date to check for answers. Put the committee's next hearing on your calendar and invite one friend to watch with you in real time. Bring snacks press, pause, argue, rewind, and then send your questions to the staff emails. Democracy is not a show, it is a workshop. To the people who disagree, thank you for staying. Disagreement forces proof to get stronger, and strength is how truth survives seasons. Ask the hardest questions you can think of and hold us to the standard we claim to love. If an answer fails, say so and show why. If an answer works, say so, because honesty loses when only the loudest voices speak. Before we close, and remember why this matters. If the truth about one family can be sealed for decades, it means systems can serve power instead of people. Your part is not to hate, but to hold. Your part is not to break, but to demand that rules do not bend for the famous. The story is big, but the steps are simple, and they start with what you do next. Here is that next step, and it is simple enough to do now. Click subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video to 3 people who will challenge you back. Leave a comment with one question you want answered on record. Save the timeline link and send it to your representatives with a short note. Please support full disclosure. Then take a screenshot of your message and post it so others can follow your lead. Do not let this moment go quiet. Moments die when we treat them like trends. Truth lives when we treat it like duty. Every view is a vote for sunlight, every share is a signal that cannot be jammed, and every comment is a brick in the square. We do not need permission to care. We need persistence that outlasts the news cycle. If the truth has begun to speak, answer back so it knows you heard it. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. Surya Mum.